I am 19 now and in college. I originally grew up in a small town in New England. The area that I'm in is basically in the middle of a few game refuges and is surrounded by farms, fields, forests, and mountains as far as the eye can see. It's beautiful in fall, but it can be annoyingly creepy at night. This all may seem irrelevant, but what you need to understand is that crime wasn't something that normally happened here at all. There was the occasional car robbery, but they would usually just turn themselves in when they figured out that someone knew another person whose car that they'd already robbed, and they would get in more trouble with their mother than the local authorities if they didn't turn themselves in. So yeah, it's that kind of a town. We all felt safe generally. My mum was always overly cautious though. She'd always walk my brother, sister, and myself down to the end of the street while we waited for the local bus to pick us up for school. We didn't mind too much as we've always lived on a street that literally had no other kids. It was still just older people, so it could get boring. It was like having about 9 extra grandparents who would often give us sweets and other things. That being said, we didn't really play with any other kids on the regular. We normally just read books and would entertain ourselves. So you can understand that we liked having our mother to talk to while we waited there for the bus. If I got the year right, my brother was about 9 at the time, my sister 5, and myself 7. So we were very young, but not incredibly so. Not to sound completely narcissistic, but we basically looked like the perfect set of children, and my brother and I looked like twins, all smiles and both of us missing our front 2 teeth, and my sister was the perfect picture of a rosy cheeks and cherry sundressed child. She would actually be stopped occasionally on vacation to take pictures with Japanese tourists. One day on our way to the bus, we open the side door of our house and see a small pile of pennies on the doormat. We were thrilled, as we thought the leprechaun had come back to give us more coins. This was a family tradition that had been started a previous week, where that if you leave a potato on your doorstep on the eve of St. Patrick's Day, then a leprechaun will leave you a stack of coins in exchange. The whole idea of this was getting money, though it was only about 27 cents. It was still exciting for all of us, and we were all happy to take the coins. Our mother didn't see a problem with it and assumed that our dad had left them before he went to work early in the morning. No one really suspected anything at the time. Naturally though, we all knew that it was made up. So then, for the next couple of weeks, the pile of money kept showing up on our doorsteps and would slowly begin to trail down the driveway, stopping at the end for a few days, before trailing down the street to where the bus usually stops every morning. At this point, my parents began to freak out, and rightly so, after discovering that my dad hadn't left the piles of coins. They began to ask the sweet old elderly neighbours whether or not they had left the coins for us, and everybody said no. We stopped taking the coins after that. The pile of coins at the end of the street grew in size over the next following weeks. This had been going on for about a month or so at this point. The coins were always there, and they were clearly meant for us, but no one was in sight. You're probably wondering why my parents didn't call the police. Well, they didn't cause them any trouble. My mother's exact words. One day, however, they did end up having to call the police. We were all standing at the side of the road besides the pile of coins when a grey sedan pulled up from behind the tree line and parked across the road from our street. We would have thought that this was normal as many people parked there to take hikes, but the car didn't have any plates. The only way that this vehicle could have been more nondescript would have been if they had painted it in camouflage. And The clutcher for us was the red scarf we saw tied to the car's side mirror. It was the same one that we had tied to our mailbox to let the bus driver know if we were sick and wouldn't be coming to school that day. It had been stolen a few months prior. As a direct result of this, an investigation did take place, but nothing ever really came of it. But once the police began monitoring the house, the coins stopped coming and the car never come back. If my mother wasn't careful with us as she always was, we would have been kidnapped faster than you could blink. After talking about it more, we came to the conclusion that he was probably after my baby sister. It's a terrifying thought that still scares me to this day. Alright, this happened to me 14 years ago when I was in the 4th grade. Back then, it was very common that every morning before school started, kids would be dropped off at the park, and from there we would walk to school before the bell rang at 8:30. Now keep in mind that the park is right next door to my old elementary school, so there really wasn't much of a distance or any danger for that matter. The one and only road that led to the park and school had lots of traffic of people walking around. So on that day my mum drops me off and we were pretty early and my friends were already walking towards a swing set in the park. I told her that I would go over there with them and wait for the bell. My mum said it was fine, but not to get to class late or anything or I'd be grounded. I quickly agreed and said goodbye to my mum and headed straight towards my friends. Now, in this park, way back, there is or was, I haven't been there in years by the way, a wooded area that you can go in for maybe half a block and then you run into a fence that separates a farm from the park. It was a very cool area to run and play in, and the swing set where my friends were hanging out was maybe 30 foot away from the trees. As I was getting closer to my friends, I saw something shift next to a tree and I stopped to get a better look at what it actually was. That's when I saw him there, a tall man with greasy brown hair and dark clothes. He was way in the back of the park in the tree line, just looking around, not doing anything that would cause alarm. So I dismissed him as just a man who was walking around, or one of the farm helpers that we would usually see from time to time going in to feed the chickens or fixing the wired fence. So I then went back to talk to my friends but kept getting a really bad feeling. Fortunately, my parents were very good at teaching me to listen to my instincts and should be aware of my surroundings whenever I'm near strangers. I was now beginning to feel very weird about the whole situation, and told my friends that we should start to head out to the entrance of the school because it was now 7:45. I started to get upset because I had that bad feeling and it was getting worse. I kind of felt like I was trapped, and it was clear that my friends definitely knew that something was up with me, but they just thought I was in a bad mood or something. I looked around, still feeling very nervous, and looked towards the woods. He was still there, except this time he was looking straight back at us. He had a cold look in his face and I could tell he was very angry. That's when he saw me staring at him and I quickly looked away and tried to play it off. Unfortunately, that gained his attention and he slowly made his way to us. When he got close, he smiled at us in a very friendly voice and started to ask us general questions about what we liked. Like what kind of video games we liked to play, what school we went to, just lots of weird questions. I stayed quiet and just listened to my dumb... Now, I tell them all the time when this comes up in conversations, but my dumb friends answer his questions without even hesitating. This man then turns to me, and with a creepy smile he tells me that I have beautiful black hair and a very pretty face. I then quietly and nervously thanked him without looking at him and moved closer to my best friend Josh. He was a 6th grader and the eldest of the bunch. When Josh saw how nervous I was because of this man, he held my hand and moved me behind him. The man looked annoyed that Josh did that and moved around him to be closer to me. At this point, I looked over to our friends and they finally realised that something was wrong, but they were just as afraid as I was to say or do anything. The man kept on saying that I was so beautiful and I looked like a pretty doll, and just kept saying all these compliments that a stranger should never tell a little kid without the parents there. It's just iffy. Now at this point, all I wanted to do was turn around and run and cry out for help, but I was petrified and I couldn't move. The man then started to touch my hair while complimenting me and said how he would like to take me home. How that I would be his special little doll, he would buy me toys and lots of pretty things. He then grabbed me by the arm and pulled me closer to him. Thankfully, when he did it, Josh snapped out of his fear of what was going on and pulled me back towards him fast, and we all took off running. He was so fast that I guess the man didn't expect it. The man cursed and yelled at us, running straight after us. I swear it felt like we were running forever towards the entrance, and I felt somewhat relieved that we were then much closer to the school and to safety, but he was still right behind us. I was sure that he was going to catch up and hurt us for running away from him, but when I looked back, he finally stopped near a bench with a hate-filled look on his face. We finally made it out of the park and just ran straight to the entrance of the school, where one of our teachers was barely making her way out to help with the street crossing when she saw us running to her, and I just collapsed on the floor sobbing while the boys told her what happened. She immediately informed the office. The entire school then went on lockdown. The cops came. I stayed glued to Josh while she spoke to the cops and waited for our parents to arrive, and thankfully the teachers were understanding of why I needed to be close to my best friend and left us alone. My mum and dad were so scared and furious that this man had tried to take me away, and were thankful that Josh reacted quickly and led us to safety, being the eldest. After that incident, the school took steps to make sure that all kids were dropped off in front of the school safely. The school district sent out letters to parents telling them not to allow us to be in the park unsupervised, as a patrol car was then assigned to our school. Although the cops searched for the man, he was never found, which terrifies me to this day. I can still remember the look in his eyes as he saw us get away. I don't know what would have happened to me had Josh had not made us run out of there, but I'm so thankful that nothing ever come of it. Okay, so here is a little bit about myself before we dive in. I'm currently a college student majoring in hospitality and tourism management, so naturally I have a part-time job at a hotel. It's pretty decent, not like a rundown motel or anything, and I've been there for about 2 years now, so I'm pretty used to the ropes and how things work. And as far as appearance, I am about 5'1", with long straight blonde hair and blue eyes, and wore a mandatory uniform of a cotton long button-up sleeve shirt and navy slacks. So anyway, on to the story. So this happened not too long ago, around the middle of August, so it was still pretty warm and muggy out. I was working the second shift from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Luckily, not totally alone, but with the night manager. It was actually a busier night than we had expected, and we were about 70% full, and had multiple families staying with little kids. So the pool was definitely in constant use. My manager was constantly running around, filling in the stocks of things like towels for the pools, running extra pillows, blankets, etc. So ultimately, that left me at the front desk tending to guests. So it was starting to slow as the hours grew later and the majority of the guests were checked in. I believe it was around 8:45 p.m. when I get a call from what sounded like a group of guys asking where our location was. This was pretty typical since our hotel is directly behind another hotel and our parking lot connects. So typically people can't see it right off the street unless coming in from a certain way. So as I'm giving them directions, he cuts me off about halfway through and said that I had a very alluring voice. Now at the time of this I was laughing on the inside because I've never really had anyone say that before and it just caught me off guard. Naturally I laughed it off and finished the conversation and hung up. About 20 or 30 minutes go by and I'd kind of forgotten about it and was going about my business when I see a big black sedan looking vehicle in the car park out the front. The only reason I really noticed it was because their music was blaring, so I watch as they get out and gather their things to bring it in. It consisted of 4 guys, about 20 to 40, all wearing dirty construction looking outfits with mudstains from, I'm assuming, where they were working outside. So they walk in and I greet them like any other guest and ask them if they are checking in. They say yes, and before I can say anything else, one blurts out, "You're the girl from the phone who we made the call to earlier, right?" It took me a second, but I realised who they were and eventually I said yes, it was me. That's when it got a little creepier and one of the younger guys, who was probably 28, who was a bit more muscular with darker hair and a beard, said, "I knew she would be pretty, you owe me $20. We'll call him Steven." They then all begin laughing about this and I didn't really hear all of it because I'm really just trying to check them in and get them out of my face. It didn't help that they kept asking me questions like my age, if I'm in school, if I had a boyfriend, etc. I didn't want to come off as rude, so I played along. Luckily my manager came around the corner and noticed I looked flustered and jumped in to help get all of them checked into their rooms and out of my way. At that point, I thought it was all going to be over and it wasn't a big deal. Oh no, it didn't stop there, sadly. So about 20 minutes later, that Steven guy that I mentioned earlier called from his room asking if I would personally bring him up more towels. I lied and said that I couldn't leave the desk, but the manager would be up there soon. He laughed and said, "That's a shame," and hung up. The way he said it literally sent chills down my spine. Anyways, later on, Steven and one of the other guys came down in bathing suits and wanted to make me go swimming with them. I just kept laughing it off and said that I didn't have a suit and basically politely declined, but he still kept on persisting and said that he'd be back in 10 minutes and I quote, "I'd better be ready." At this point, I'm pretty creeped out by this dude and his advances and just want to go home. I told my manager and she said she'd handle it and after came back and stayed at the desk with me. Luckily he never came back, so I'm guessing that the manager had scared him off. So just as my shift started to come to an end and we're transitioning people off, guess who pops up in the lobby? This time he doesn't say anything and just looks at me in the eyes and walks directly outside to smoke. Not shortly after, another one of the older guys joined him. Now I'm not stupid and there is sure enough no way in hell that I'm going outside alone to get to my car past these guys, so I told the manager and she walks out with me. I literally feel them stare at me as I try and just go hurriedly into my car. I started to peel out and he yelled, "I can't wait for you to come back, sweetheart." Those words creeped me out so much, I didn't look back. All I could think of was that thank God that I wasn't working for the next 2 days, and by that time they had already left. Here's some backstory. I'm a 21-year-old female and I live in Germany. I'd broken up with my boyfriend of 6 years a week before this happened, so you can imagine I was very upset at the time. I met a pretty nice guy, we'll just call him Jay, a while beforehand and was starting to like him a lot. Distraction is one of the best cures, am I right? On the night in question, my best friend, we'll just call her Debbie, and I met up at the Christmas market to get some drinks. I invited Jay to join us, and he and Debbie got on very well. Too well, as it turns out. We went to a club in the red light district, and they were kissing the entire night, so dumb me gets wasted, drowning my sorrows and sulking. After a while I got fed up with everything what was going on, so I decided that I was gonna leave on my own. I always think of myself as quite street smart, and being 5'10" and growing up in the youngest of 5 kids, I have learned to defend myself. So I'm heading to the train station. By now it was about 4 AM at the time, passing all the clubs and dodging other drunk people, when I stopped for a second because I had the urge to be sick. Great, right? As I was bracing myself, I hear a man's voice. I look up and there's a taxi that had pulled up and the driver was beckoning to me. He asks me if I need a ride. Being the cheapskate I am, I declined. No charge, he says. And now the dumb part. I accepted. By this point I was drunk, broken hearted, and also annoyed that my friend hadn't come after me. So I threw caution to the wind and just got in. The taxi driver was unshaven, middle-aged, and I think he was from somewhere in Asia originally. He introduces himself as Dave and asks me why I was looking so sad. I tell him the whole story, of course, and he was very understanding. How about we get a drink at the gas station, my treat? So we got some beers and he says we can go to his flat and drink the beers because his shift had ended, and yes, I agreed to that. We listened to music in the car and drank beer until we arrived at his flat. He's been drinking beer at the wheel, and I thought that was weird, but I was pretty damn inhabilitated and just shrugged it off. We pulled up to the block of flats where he lived, and I had absolutely no idea where we were. Anyway, we got up to his flat and he doesn't turn the lights on, even though I could hardly see anything. My nostrils were assaulted with the stench of his flat. He then manoeuvred his way around with the torch on his phone. I didn't want to seem impolite, so I sit down and he puts music on and lights candles. I start singing along, and the whole time he was staring at me avidly. I love your singing, I want to record it. Then things started to get weird. He rolled a joint and kept commenting on how beautiful I was and how much he wants to record my singing. I start to fidget and send my other friends some messages explaining the situation. None of them answered though, they were probably out partying. Now Dave was really starting to creep me out. I then start noticing more and more that the house is absolutely filthy. I'm panicking a lot now, and funnily enough, for the first time that evening, I started to wonder what the hell I was doing. So I get out my phone and start taking selfies of us. Thank God for the front flash, and sending them on Snapchat to my friends so they'd have some kind of idea what my murderer looks like. I had taken a selfie of us in the car over without him noticing. I also sent that to my friend. He got really pissed at that and rolled another joint. I was getting extremely agitated. He'd said he'd drive me home for a few drinks after. Now he was getting stoned. He kept rambling about how I needed a real man to treat me right and to look after me, etc. He asked me for my phone number, and because I had my phone in my hand, I given it to him so he wouldn't be too annoyed. After about an hour of this, he was inching further and further towards me, and his bloodshot, horrible eyes were staring at me in an extremely uncomfortable way. I started to say that I needed to go home because I was tired. Sleep here. I was massively freaked out at this point. I was still trying to be polite and declined. He also asked me who I was sending those pictures to which I answered that I had sent them to my friend. he indigently said that he couldn't drive because he had been smoking. I told him that I needed to get home right now. Then he said he would drive me, trying to sound assertive and brave, though I didn't feel it. I also mentioned that my friend would be wondering what I was doing and would be worried, and I wouldn't want to freak her out and have her call in the cops. Wonders of wonders, it worked. We get into the car and he doesn't speak. I made a video of us in the car pretending to be jamming out to his music and sent it to my friend. This was just in case, I was still gone, but I was still smart in that degree. I was pretty worried about giving out my specific address so he couldn't find it, but I just said the name of the closest bus stop. I get out of the car, thanked him for the ride and the drinks. "I'll call you. I want to record your singing." I waved and walked in the direction of my flat. As soon as I was around the corner, I broke into a sprint until I reached my house and was safely in the flat. As you can imagine, my friends went crazy when they heard how stupid I'd been and how easily I could have been chopped up into bits. He wasn't calling me after though, but he did send me a Happy New Year weirdo video. Over the last 20 years, I have had the privilege of being able to portray the iconic Santa Claus at my local mall. For safety purposes, all the names and locations within these writings have been changed, but the context remains exactly the same. 20 years ago, I took on the iconic role as Santa Claus at my local mall. Christmas is my favourite holiday and I always had the Santa Claus build anyway. I was somewhat overweight. I was a gentleman who was able to grow a long beard during the winter season. All I had to do was dye my beard white, don the red suit and I'd be golden. I worked on the voice the best I could to ensure that I didn't sound like a 20-something-year-old guy. I had the voice, the suit, the beard, the look, and everything else that I needed to get ready for the Christmas rush. Outside of the red suit, I was just an electrician who makes a decent wage, but every year for 20 years after Thanksgiving, I was Santa Claus. A beacon of joy and happiness for little kids all around the world. In my 20 years on the job, I learned the most valuable job that, out of all of my time, I did so. Never promise anything. There will always be kids that ask for a lot for Christmas, things that most parents couldn't even dream of getting their kids. I was taught from day one that you always say the following: Santa will see what he can do. Making promises was the last thing that you wanted to do. Really it was. Some parents could barely afford to buy their children's decent clothes, let alone a new video game system or whatnot. I had held back tears numerous times whenever a kid would ask for something as simple as a new toothbrush. The great thing about this mall was that there was no fee to sit on my lap, and the only fee came if you wanted a picture to take home, which was an even $5 at a nice 8x10 and 2 wallet prints. This Christmas was the toughest because it was my last year portraying Santa Claus. All of the mall employees hugged me every day when I came to work outside of the costume. By this time, I was pushing 50, still working as an electrician, but I always thought that portraying Santa Claus was my best job ever. All good things must come to an end, however, and thus did my job as portraying the iconic Santa Claus. The day after Thanksgiving, known as Black Friday to most, was the first day of my last tenure as Santa. There were tears, mostly from me, but I knew whoever was taking my place was going to do just great. The turnout that year was far better than anyone had ever imagined. I thank God that it turned out this way. I think word got out that simply the man himself, Ted Bridges, that's me, was retiring as Santa, and they wanted one last memory with the man who had done it for 20 years. It was really humbling, but I'm not so special for the most part. The kids were great, as usual. Sure, there were some kids that were a bit spoilt, for a lack of a better term. They asked for ridiculous things like drones, the newest iPhones, iPads. These kids were barely over 10. They shouldn't need these things, right? Or was I just getting older? So, Friday the 23rd was my last shift, the night before Christmas Eve. The mall was packed with last minute shoppers and family with the kids coming to see me. This last day was easily my toughest to date, as I knew after that day I would be moving on from playing Santa Claus. I know this seems strange, but after a while I started to believe I actually was Santa Claus. Crazy, right? What truly set me apart from the other mall Santas was the fact that I never took a break. I would be there from 10 in the morning until 7 in the evening. I never once took even a lunch break or any break. Santa never took breaks, and neither would I. That day went by faster than I could ever begin to imagine or explain, and at 7 o'clock, it was time to wrap it up. I was beginning to leave when I noticed a little girl slowly approaching me. I smiled. "Hello, young lady, where are your parents?" She didn't speak. She kept walking towards me with her arms held out as if she wanted to pick me up. I looked around for her parents, but I didn't see anyone that was looking for her. I picked her up and put her on my lap. "Now, what's your name, young lady?" "Lisa." "Lisa? My, what a beautiful name you have, Lisa. What's your last name?" "Wheeler." I took this information to relay a radio message to have the name Lisa Wheeler broadcast over the mall speaker system. That way her parents would come and find her. While this was happening, I kept her company. "What do you want for Christmas, Lisa?" She didn't answer though. She just looked off into the distance as if she was in some kind of trance or something. It was weird, but she then looked up at me with the cutest set of blue eyes. A friend. I was a little taken back by that answer. In my 20 years of being Santa, I never heard a kid say that they wanted a friend for Christmas. I patted her on the head. "I'll be your friend, Lisa. Santa Claus will always be your friend." She smiled at me and gave me a hug and hopped off my lap. I tried to make her stay put until security came, but she ran off. I weighed about 300 pounds at the time, that's with the red suit on, and no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't catch up to her. I saw Lisa turning a corner into a department store, and I did so at the same time. There was no sign of her. I started asking around if anybody had seen a little girl, about 4 feet tall, long blonde hair, blue eyes, pigtails, in a pink and white dress. No one saw her. Security came and asked where she went. I told them that she went off and ran into the department store, and they started becoming worried. "Did her parents show?" I asked them. "Not yet. Maybe she wandered off from home and came here." I was getting more and more upset and worried as time went on, but after a thorough search of the mall, there was no signs of Lisa Wheeler. She had disappeared. It was around 1 in the morning when they finally told me I should go home and get some sleep, but I couldn't sleep knowing that there was a defenseless little girl on her own, probably scared. I laid in my bed all night, staring at the ceiling. I kept thinking, how could I have let that little girl down? I should have been able to catch up with her and keep her safe. The next morning I got up, made myself some breakfast, and went onto the computer to do a little research. I thought if I could find the parents, I could let them know where she was last seen. If she had been found yet, I googled her name, Lisa Wheeler. Missing child. 9-year-old Lisa Wheeler was reported missing by her mother, Miranda Wheeler, February 6th at approximately 9 a.m. She was last seen wearing a pink and white fleece dress, as well as her hair in pigtails. She is approximately 4 feet tall, 2 inches, weighing at 75 pounds, and has blonde hair and blue eyes. If you have any information regarding the whereabouts of Lisa Wheeler, please contact the County Department of Police. Nothing made sense. February 6th? I just saw her the night before on the 23rd. Perhaps it was a typo, but I did more research. And then the more easy I become. The next article sent shivers down my spine. Breaking news. The body of Lisa Wheeler has been found today, February 16th, in a frozen ravine a mile outside of her parents' home. Police are investigating the cause of death, which appears to be an act of foul play. Lisa Wheeler was gone. She died nearly a year before I met her. All she wanted was a friend. The following story happened to me when I was younger and used to work in a mental asylum. Now, just being in the asylum itself didn't really scare me. I know some of the patients go kind of loony sometimes. I mean, one time, they all tried to break into the kitchen. One of them had a knife. We just disarmed him and nothing ever come of it, but that's needless to say that it was still a really scary experience. But again, like I said, I wasn't really scared of the patients. I felt sorry for them, if anything, because it's really not their fault that they're there. I had an injury at work that meant that I had to work here. I didn't really like working at the place because just how creepy it was. It was this massive old building that had been there for at least 100 years, and it just gave me really weird vibes. And like I said, it wasn't the patients that ever scared me. I was working in the kitchen and I normally just had the job of clearing all the pans and pots. It was nothing too hard, it was just not very good pay for the amount of work we were actually doing, because we could actually be in there for hours at a time without being allowed a break. And it was always so hot and sweaty in there. That was as a direct result of the pure amount of food we were cooking for literally hundreds of people. Obviously that made a lot of steam, so at times it could just be unbearable in there. I didn't mind working there, but all I wanted to do was get back to my other job because it just paid so much more money. It was stupid really thinking of it now, but like I said, I couldn't do my normal work and I needed the money. So there were rumours about this place being haunted by something. Now the first that I ever heard about or well experienced was even a scary story in itself. At the time I had to go upstairs to speak to a lady, we'll just call her Mary to keep her private, but she was upstairs in an office and I needed to go and give her something that my boss had told me I needed to. As I was doing the cooking prior to this, I heard somebody running around and I was certain that somebody else had escaped, and there were medics rushing to try and contain them and not letting them do anything else stupid like grab a knife or whatever. So my boss gave me the orders and I went up. As I went up to Mary's office, I saw that all of her things were there, but she wasn't. She didn't have a coat, but her bag was there. That's odd. I started to think to myself that maybe one of the mental patients had attacked her, or maybe something much worse. I began sprinting around looking for Mary, but as hard as I tried, I couldn't find her. It was so weird. As I went back down, giving up on searching for her, I asked my boss if he had seen Mary and he said, "You're not going to believe this, come here." And he took me over to a phone with another worker. It was Mary's husband on the phone. He had called and said that, "I don't know what she's seen, but she's pretty sure it is a ghost, but I'm going to have to come down here now because she said she's never going to return to the building to go and get her stuff and collect her last payment. What? What? I looked at my boss and we both looked at each other as equally as confused. My boss did look a little concerned, however, and I know that he had worked there a lot longer than I had. I just went back to my work and never thought anything of it. Surely it wasn't a ghost, right? Well, about a week after that incident, I was talking to some of the other workers and we was discussing how that it seems like patients are escaping all the time because we can constantly hear feet and movement upstairs. Not in the store directly above us, but the one just on top of that. I know it sounds weird that we could hear all of the things going on from there, but we had a small shaft that we didn't use at the time but was originally used to pass food up and down from the floors, so we could kind of hear everything what was going on. And the floor above ours was mostly used for office rooms and storage, but we could constantly hear feet. It didn't make sense. We were both growing concerned because we realised that most of the times we heard this was when all of the patients were away in bed and there was nobody up there to be making any sound. Not only that, it seemed that every time that we went towards that floor you just got a really weird feeling like you didn't want to be there. So, with all of this put in my mind at ease, my friend went home and it was just me left in the kitchen washing up some dishes. My boss was still there but he was further away. Now at night time a lot of the staff go away because the patients are a lot easier at night where they're not active and most of them are sleeping. And what also put my mind further into this panicky state was that other than that one incident, I've literally never heard of any of the patients breaking out or doing anything. So it was just really weird to hear all the steps. As I went to walk towards my boss because I started to feel a little uneasy, I asked him about all of the sounds upstairs and he come close to me and said, "Look, I'll just keep this between me and you, but we're pretty sure that this place is actually haunted. I know this sounds stupid, but you know the footsteps? I hear it too. I hear them." I was very concerned at this point because I usually expected the older adult workers to be a lot more brave than I was about these things, but seeing an adult with the same fear of you almost takes you back to your childhood when you didn't know what to do. It's a very primitive, scary feeling. I went back to doing the dishes and lo and behold, I got an order that I had to go up there to go and return a meal to one of the patients. Now, I could have easily walked outside, but it was freezing outside. It would have been about a 5-minute walk too through the courtyard and I really didn't want to do that. But that meant my only other option was to walk up the stairs, past a small platform, then up the really dodgy stairs that seem like they can't hold their own weight, let alone another person's. Then walk through the notoriously strange and chilly little hallway to go back down more steps to go and give them this. Great, I thought to myself. I wasn't too worried though, because all I'd ever heard was the footsteps and I thought that Mary was just being paranoid. Needless to say, I was terrified to do this still. This only became apparent when it was time for me to actually go up there. It was okay though, I rationalised that. Obviously it was too cold to go outside, but if I sprinted up there then I would have no problem. I was young and athletic back then, so I could have just easily ran through it, then ran to where I needed, then ran back. I wouldn't have to think anything of it, right? So I hesitantly put on my coat and opened the door from the kitchen. As soon as I closed the door to that kitchen, it hit me. It was instantly silent, where that it almost isolated the kitchen closing that door and all of the heavy machinery sounds from the mass cooking that we were doing. I don't know, it's just very eerie. You'd have to experience it to know what it is, but for those of you who do, it's almost like you've stepped into another world. It's almost like the atmosphere was different. What was worse for me was that all of the lights were off. I had didn't like this one bit, but I thought I was just overthinking it and being paranoid, right? So I continued up the first set of steps. I stopped and had a listen. There was no one else around. Oh, thank God, I thought to myself. I was almost worried that somebody had even broken into this place. So I went up the first set of steps and it hit me just how dark it was. Where they cut the power in there at night basically to all the lights, it makes it very dark. As I was going up though, I noticed that all of the hairs on the back of my neck instantly stood up. It was almost like there was some kind of energy there. I'd gone up to the other platform and I just stopped. I turned to my right because I was sure that I'd seen a shadow or something down the hallway. Just as that happened, I heard what sounded like somebody sprinting through above me. "Oi, who are you?" I shouted, and I began following after them. I looked up and I could see someone with a long cloak on, sprinting up the steps. I sprinted as fast as I possibly could, now filled with more rage than anything. "You're not meant to be in here." I sprinted after them as fast as I could going up the steps. I had to stop for a second because I almost slipped. And for 1 second I hesitated to go any further because it was those dodgy steps I had finally been met with. There wasn't fear now, it was just anger. I had to stop myself again before following this guy up the steps that he had so easily went up. I just went to the bottom of them about to follow him up, but I had to stop again because I was worried it couldn't handle my weight. No time to think, I thought to myself. I then sprinted up the steps after him, making far more noise than he ever did. And as I finally got to the top of the steps, it got even colder. I was now finally just about to be able to catch this guy. I was pretty sure it was a dead end if you didn't have the key you needed. Then I could just see the top of the hallway. One more step and I was up, and I was stopped in my tracks. There was nobody up here. The door was shut. There were no windows. And it was silent. I couldn't hear footsteps, and there was literally no way that the guy could have went. It was impossible for him to have made an escape, and there was no way he could have even gotten to the door in that time. The hallway was far too long, and there were no doors apart from the one at the other end of it. And that cold feeling only got more intense. There was no reason for it to be this cold. Then it hit me. The clothes he was wearing were far too old for the time that the story took place. Heck, it was almost like he was wearing 200-year-old clothes. Who wears a cloak nowadays? I almost fainted as it hit me that this was no normal person that I was chasing. I then turned back and it was almost like the fear and adrenaline caught up with me once again. I sprinted down them steps, making all the sound in the world as I did. Started sprinting down the other steps, absolutely terrified, almost feeling like I wasn't in my body. I ran, and then I was finally met with the door that led into the kitchen. I opened the door and my boss's face just dropped when he saw mine. He could see how pale I was, and he only said these words to me: "I'll give you your stuff, go and get your coat, and I'll go and grab your last paycheck. Thank you for your time." Hello everyone, I wanted to say a massive thank you to you all for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I know I've been saying for a little while that I'm going to be having collabs coming soon, and they're all going to come this week, so I know that you all should really like it because I've got some really good names on it, and I'm also going to feature on some other channels, and I'll link them at the end of my next video. I know I've still not done the update video yet, but trust me, I'm about to record it after I do this. If you have any suggestions for me, then please leave them in the comments below and subscribe for my future content. I wanted to say just thank you again to all you guys because I really do appreciate you. I know I might have said that in the last one, but I don't know, but honestly I really do. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you really to everyone. and I'm uploading a lot more where that I'm a lot happier in life at the moment. And with the with the 3 weeks I had off up until now, it made me realize that there were some problems I needed to get working on, and since I've got them fixed and really made an effort on them, I'm just a lot happier. And it's really important that you're happy in life, and especially enjoy your young years. Yeah. So I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then please smash the like button for me, because it helps. And yeah, thank you guys. That's all I've got to say for now. I could still say a bit more, but I'm gonna leave it for the video I'm about to shoot now. Alright, thank you guys. Have a nice day. I'll talk to you soon.